Welcome to Crafty Sourcer. If you're looking for a raw, unfiltered podcast on all things sourcing in APAC, you've come to the right place. Grab a coffee or wine and join your host and other guests as we dive deep into the complex and ever-evolving world of sourcing, keeping you informed on insights, tools, and even at times, a healthy sourcing debate or two. Now, here's your host, Denise Pereira from KaleidoSource. Settle in and let's get crafty.
Hi everybody and welcome to Crafty Sourcer, your bi-weekly dose of all things sourcing across APAC and the world. My name's Matt Woodard. I am the founder of scalr, and today we're flipping the script. So you are being joined by our usual host, Denise Pereira. Hi Denise, welcome to your own podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I mean, it feels really awkward, but I would have nobody else but you facilitating and hosting my own podcast. So, thanks.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the for doing me the honor of allowing me to be the host today. So, what we thought we'd do today on this the first episode of 2024. Happy New Year, everybody! Is get to know our host a little bit more. Denise, you've had a really fascinating story, so keen to sort of dig in and find out a little bit more about you. I'm sure that your growing horde of listeners would be keen to learn a little bit more behind your background and experience. So let's start with a few quick fire questions then. So wow. The first question is who. I'll exclude myself from this, but who is your favorite other person in TA and why?
That I was going to say you, Matt, but now that you excluded yourself. Look, this is going to be a hard one, but I am going to call out one person, and I think they are a testament to my own journey in sourcing, and I think I have to call out Irina Shemeva here. And one of the reasons is when I started in sourcing, there were not a lot of people that I could look up to, and Irina was one of the first people, and I sat down and went through heaps of her material, her information, sat down for a couple of her trainings, and she's been instrumental in me sort of gearing up and getting a lot more better in the field that I chose to stay in. So, I mean, I love a lot of the people that I've looked up to, but if I had to choose one and do a hat tip to it, would definitely be Irina.
The great Irina. Shouts out to her for sure. Okay. Who was top of your 2023 Spotify playlist?
I definitely think it's going to be Billie Eilish.
Okay, big Billie fan. Okay.
Yeah, I do like her music. It can be a bit sad, but I also feel like her lyrics are pretty deep. So I'm all about the DNMs.
I didn't pick that about you. That's something I've learnt today. So. Do you? Not everybody does, but do you have any New Year's resolutions? Now we're a few days into the year. Do you have any New Year's resolutions for 2024?
I used to be one of those fans for New Year, New Me bullshit, but I think I've kind of canned that because you can make changes in your life anytime, any day, any second of the year. So I don't have any specific resolutions for myself. I think I definitely want to get a lot more healthier, and I've fallen in love with Pilates, as you know. Ani and myself both go every day if possible. So I definitely want to continue doing that.
Nice, fantastic. And I think thinking about KaleidoSource as well, and maybe what you're doing here with Crafty Sourcer as well. Do you have any sort of clear goals and things you'd like to achieve with either of these for 2024?
I think for KaleidoSource, definitely partner up and venture up with companies and people that are very like-minded, and especially where the core values align very, very well together. This year I've become very meaningful and intentional with what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and I really want to carry that into next year's goals as well, both for Crafty Sourcer and KaleidoSource.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those of you who don't know you particularly well, what's your spirit animal?
Oh my God. If you don't know me, but if you've met me and seen the dark circles under my eyes and that I love to just eat and roll around in my couch, it's definitely a panda.
I mean, it's so appropriate. Yeah. It's so appropriate. All right, great. Well, that's really, really good. So look, tell us what made you start Crafty Saucer, and I guess I'm keen to obviously explore a bit about KaleidoSource as well. But tell us what made you start Crafty Saucer in the first place.
Crafty Saucer was born from KaleidoSource, but let's talk a little about Crafty Saucer. So when I was thinking about doing a podcast, I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel. So I thought of, okay, we have Tarpod, we have Rubber Band, phenomenal podcast, phenomenal guest people, topics, but there wasn't anything that I was aware of that was solely dedicated to sourcing. And I wanted to bridge those gaps because after my role was made redundant earlier this year, and when I was interviewing with companies, I saw that there was a knowledge gap to begin with. And it's been there for a while within Australia. So I really wanted to change that narrative. And I wanted to shine a spotlight on APAC as a region, because I felt like, Europe, AMER, LATAM, other regions, they do it well, they're loud and proud about it. And we have some phenomenal people here in Australia, like, Maren Boyd Andrews, Leo Casas. We've got so many people from other parts of the APAC region doing some phenomenal stuff. And I really wanted to shine that spotlight on us as a region, but also, create a lot more awareness about sourcing. One thing I did know before going live with the podcast was sourcing is not everyone's cup of tea. And, people will take what they resonate with and they'll leave what they don't resonate with. So this was three main reasons why I started the podcast.
Yeah, and I guess just by extension, KaleidoSource as well. So that's kind of in line with your thinking there, is it? Just to really
Yes.
Don't let me put words in your mouth, but sort of really shine the light on sourcing as a function.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, very similar to Crafty Saucer. When I was starting out KaleidoSource, I sort of thought of, like I said, I'm not a fan of reinventing the wheel. I know that there are consultancies out here that do tap into sourcing, but it's not offered as an embedded or a full-fledged solution offering. So I wanted to make sure that there was nothing out there that already exists. So we packaged up sort of KaleidoSource, which is like source, build, and grow. So these are like our 3 tiers. And what we did was we packaged that up into solution offering under those 3 tiers. So we have like workshops for individuals and TA teams who want to upskill themselves, or the recruitment teams more from a sourcing perspective. The other part is, fractional sourcing and recruitment support, which includes lead generation. And we work with 2 phenomenal customers mid this year. And the third is building out a sourcing function for SMBs, which hasn't happened, unfortunately, but we also know a lot of recruitment teams have been made redundant. So companies are not investing in anything extra right now. So
it's still early days, isn't it? For sure. Yeah. But it's been an interesting. I mean, it's been obviously interesting. Being a friend. I mean, that in itself is quite an interesting thing. But interesting seeing the evolution of a sourcing function. I guess way back when we started in recruitment, sort of 15, 16 years ago, sourcing was the first step towards getting to be a recruiter. It's really, and I've listened to the Crafty Saucer a few times, and there seems to be a resonating theme with all of your guests that tend to be the case, but then they sort of branched out and got more specific and more focused. What was it for you that really that is the sweet spot from you in terms of sourcing? Because I know you do recruitment as well. You've hired a lot of people. You've been very successful doing that. But you always come back to sourcing. What is it for you that it gives you that passion for it?
I think it comes down to one thing. It's about being creative. Because if you look at the evolution of sourcing, typically sources back in the day were researchers, right? So when you say the word sourcing, people always think about, okay, this is too hard to do because all we have to be super good at Boolean. We have to know where to find these people. We have to be very, very technical. And while that is still true, there are now different facets of sourcing, right? So when you think of from finding people to engaging with them, from having proper targeted sort of strategies and tailored engagement sort of, searches that you do, you can pick and choose which part of sourcing that you really want to resonate with or that you already resonate with. And I think that's the beauty of sourcing, is that evolution of, we are not just technical. We enjoy something that we do, and we can continue honing into that as well. So you don't just have to be super technical. You don't just have to be good at engagement. You can be good at different things. I look at sourcing and I explain it to people who don't understand sourcing. I think of us as front-end engineers for an app that, customers really love using. And based on your user experience, you keep coming back to that. So we are somewhat of the same. So when you break it down in terms of, your saving on agency spend, your market intelligence, your candidate experience, which is so crucial, your employer branding, when we search, we have a very holistic thought process around where we go, how we're finding people, how we're engaging with them. There's not just one way of looking at things. And that's the beauty of it, is there's a lot of diversity within the sourcing realm that we have to not just get used to, but have it as a part of our DNA when we start as a sourcer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to preface this next question because with the fact that I'm fully on board, and as a TA leader, I've seen the value in a number of previous organizations. The last place where we made redundant this year, but then prior to that, it's at Slalom Build as well, where we rolled out a sourcing function. The value that it provides is staggering. Why do you think it's important to have a dedicated sourcing function? I know I have my view, but I'm keen to understand from your perspective why you think it's important.
What's your view on it, Matt? And we are friends, so I'd love to ask you this question because we work together as well. So
yeah, look, my view is that it's an extension of the recruitment function. Being able to keep in touch with candidates. I think the businesses that I've worked in, it's all very fast paced and the demand is constantly there. We need to turn the tap on, therefore we need to hire 10, 20, 30, 40 developers. Yeah. It's virtually impossible to as a recruiter who has that much expectation on them from the business to then keep a candidate pool of 50, 60, 70, 80 candidates warm for an extended period of time. It's a full-time job, and that's where I see sourcing bigs playing such an important part, because that's the part, the extension of recruitment that actually for me is a vital part of the business. You're getting people interested in the business. It's very much, to me, it's an engagement, it's a marketing role. It's actually the first contact you have with an organization tends to be through a sourcing function. So it's someone who actually reaches out and says, hey, we're really interested in you, and I will keep in touch. And I think that is really important. That's sometimes recruiters get a bad name because you hear from them once and then you don't hear from them again. And that's something that's leveled at us, and it's fine. And it does happen, absolutely. But this is where I see real value from a sourcing perspective, is that, Denise, I said to you, okay, right, we need 3 product designers who you do know. Within 20 minutes, you've gone, okay, these people have been vetted, and here we go. So you can move that much more quickly. You can move through a process so much quicker than a recruiter going, okay, who do I know? And then almost starting that process again.
Yeah.
The value is to me is clear to see. And I think organizations who don't have a sourcing function are really letting themselves down, because, we know how competitive it is in tech. We know that the A candidates aren't staying around for long. And we know that we need to make sure that we are giving ourselves the best competitive advantage as we can over any of our competitors by making sure that we work with speed and pace and candidate experience. Now, what we're finding is that found in the last few roles is that, it really is about that, building that bond and that experience, because, you may well be able to get more money as another organization, but the difference between you coming to my company versus another company who may be paying you 10K more is the experience, is the feeling, is how you've been treated during the recruitment process. And that process starts with a sourcer. I feel like you and people like Dij and Leo and the other people you mentioned, worth your weight in gold. I think it's such a valuable aspect of the overall recruitment ecosystem.
The fact that, the way you explained it really does show that you absolutely get sourcing. And I wish hear more head of TAs and directors of TAs speaking so positively about sourcing. Not that anybody has anything bad to say about sourcing. I just feel like, because you've lived through it. At Slalom, you did it. We did it at Tory together. you've seen it firsthand, being built and how it's implemented and how you can take it from A to B, X, Y, Z. To your question, Matt, it's not important. It's absolutely necessary, right? And for a couple of reasons, especially if you have ambitious growth plans and there's strategic alignment between the business and hiring functions, it will obviously give you a competitive advantage, right? Sourcers always will specialize in areas that recruiters either don't have the time to focus on or don't have a massive interest in, right? And earlier I talked about the different facets of sourcing, and this is where sourcers can go and specialize a lot more in those areas. The data's out there. The improvement in quality of hire through targeted searches and tailored engagement strategies, saving dollars on agency spend. I remember when I was part of the sourcing team for ANZX, we didn't have heaps of KPIs. Our only KPI was how much money were we saving the bank by them not having to go out to agencies for any of the roles. That was it. And that was in itself, a very telling story of how important it is to have a sourcing function. Market intelligence, your competitor analysis. Again, we go back to candidate experience time and time again, because it's so crucial to ensuring that your hiring strategies are in line with what your employer branding is saying. Unfortunately, sourcing, as you mentioned, I think in one of your points, it can be looked at your last resort in your hiring cycle, whereas it should always be your first point of call before anything else. And a prime example I can give with that is when I was at ANZX, we were building out our mobile engineering team, and we got 2-week heads up prior to them sort of saying, yep, this is all good to go. And we went out and sourced the first 26 candidates, hires that were made. Not a single advertisement was put out. And that was just because there was some level of decent workforce planning that sat behind it, and that they had got the sources on board from the get-go versus as their last resort. So, it's not just important, it's becoming more and more necessary.
I mean, this is in an ideal world scenario, you'd have budget for a sourcer. And, as I said, we kind of discussed the importance of it, but just throwing you on the spot a little bit here, how would you go about doing it if you were a smaller organization, or you did genuinely have limited funds available, so you could only hire maybe one recruiter? Would there be any advice you'd provide in terms of starting that sourcing journey? Any sort of key things you'd want to put in place versus, obviously having someone dedicated to the function? Because as I said, it's not always possible to do that.
And there are companies who don't need a sourcing function, and that's where the recruiter needs to really step up and start educating themselves around sourcing. One is to do it because you have to do it. One is to actually have that innate curiosity to do a lot more than what you're used to doing. And this is where sourcing actually really comes into play. So someone who doesn't have a budget, look, find yourself a mentor, because nowadays with so many tools that are out there, you can absolutely be, building something without a massive budget. Let's take an example of Tori, right? Tori was a small design consultancy. We thankfully had a decent enough budget where we could implement Hire easy. But how did we do it? We had to, first of all, understand what the pain points of the businesses were. We had to understand what the hiring goals look like. Now, smaller companies may not be hiring 50 people in the year. It might just be 20 people. So, do you actually really need a sourcing function? No. What you need is someone who knows how to nurture and who knows how to pipeline manage. And that goes hand in hand with knowing what your business is actually doing and what are they hiring for in the next 6-12 months. And for that, you don't need to be spending tons and tons of money, even on a recruiter license. There are so many smaller platforms that you can be using for nurturing. If you have the right ATS in place that does some level of decent search skills within that, you should even be using that. Like I would say, don't go out and start, spending 90, 100 grand on, expensive tools when there are some decent tools out there that will do something that you needed to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, really good advice. So it's really just a case of getting to have a better sense of what the business is looking for, understanding the tools and systems you do have in place, and then identifying where there might be gaps where you could invest. Maybe not the cost of an entire person, but certainly in terms of tools. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thinking about KaleidoSource, because you as you mentioned, you've already done some interesting work with a few really good people so far. Kind of mix of things. training and some hands-on work as well. What impact do you think you've had with any of the customers you've worked with so far?
But first of all, I'd like to think, and I hope that I've, made a positive impact, whoever I've worked with. But I'll kind of give two examples here that stand out to me. And the first one is from a workshop perspective. I ran my first workshop with Circuit Recruitment Group. So massive shout out to Din for taking a chance on me. And that was my first time as a solopreneur running a live workshop with 15 recruiters. And what we did, and those that attended gained new insights and ways of thinking about sourcing, because when you look at an agency landscape, everyone is very focused on delivering, and the sourcing component can sometimes suffer. And what I mean by that is that the creativity aspect of it. So we talked about, we worked on some live requisitions, how to actually search outside of LinkedIn, Google X-Ring being your best friend. It costs nothing, and you can get much better results from it. Also on how to be more creative versus falling back into, old behaviors. Some of the recruiters still message me telling me how they're continuing to use those techniques to find candidates that LinkedIn tends to hide. So, LinkedIn algorithms are a bit dodgy every now and then. The other one I'll call out is where I did this sort of fractional sourcing gig. It was short term, and I recently released a case study on my LinkedIn as well with the SaaS company. So I partnered with the SaaS company in Sydney. It was a bit challenging because they had about 4 opportunities on. The challenge there was that we couldn't hire outside of Sydney. And even though they were fully remote, we had to find people that were willing to come into the office. That was the challenge. The third challenge was the salary on offer. So the objective within that was to obviously source a lot of qualified candidates to make sure that they were qualified, interested, and available. Our numbers were against 12. So 12 for the 3 roles that they had on. So 4 candidates for each role. So at least one person gets hired from there. Now our timeframes were only 4 weeks. We were working towards a very tight delivery time frame. What that actually led to was 2 things. One was we made a hire out of that at a senior level, not at the level that I was actually working at. So we hired someone into a senior position. Instead of 12, we had 15 qualified people who went through the process. And then from a pipeline perspective, we had, I think, anywhere between 30 to 35 candidates who became part of the pipeline for them to reach out to in the next 3, 6, 9 months, because they liked the story of what the customer was doing, the impact that they were trying to make in the Sydney market or the Australian market, and how they could actually come in the later months and help them out. So it was, in conclusion, it was a win-win. Number one, we got more than what we had actually set out as deliverables. So for me, that was a big win because it was someone that I'd worked with previously, and we kind of partnered together after I think 8 or 10 years coming together. So in conclusion, it was really good, and I hope that, I get to work with them next year.
Amazing. So in terms of in terms of your sweet spot, I guess, for KaleidoSource, don't want this to be completely just be an advert for KaleidoSource, but what are you, what's the sweet spot for you? Where do you think you can add most value into organizations in 2024?
I love that question because it's really getting me to think about KaleidoSource now. Look, my sweet spot has always been not staying in my comfort zone and being creative when it comes to that. I love coming up with new ideas and trying non-traditional methods. And in recruitment, we're very used to doing things traditionally. So I want to work with companies that are not afraid for us to come in and challenge the status quo, try new things, fail quick, learn from that, and build something for them. Come in as an embedded partner, whether that means, coming in and training some of your people and then, partnering with you down the line. So think about the source, build, grow. So we can come in, we can absolutely, source for you, provide fractional recruitment support. We can also build out functions for you where you need it. And then we can also grow your teams in terms of, their capabilities from a sourcing perspective. I'm also working on a new offering, which I should, let everybody know about in January. It's all around candidate pipeline management, which I'm actually really excited about because I don't think there's an offering that exists just yet, at least in the Australian market. So super excited about that.
Watch this space. Fantastic. And I guess digging your virtual crystal ball out, DP, what are your predictions from a sourcing perspective for 2024?
I think I put out something yesterday as part of the advent calendar, and I've been banging on about this again. Nurturing and nourishing your top of funnel is going to be so crucial to your hiring strategy. It's an employer-led market at the moment, and I reckon moving into 2024, it's going to continue like that. So which means, for one job, you're going to receive anywhere from 100 to 200 applicants. How do you sift through the noise? So think before that, reverse engineer, so before you even have to go to market or advertise, start nurturing your pipeline for that. We need to start thinking that if we're not hiring aggressively next year, which roles do we need to start pipelining for? Start so that you may not even have to rely on advertising and you get your ROI on the tools that you've already paid so much for. That's my one sort of prediction, is that top of funnel is going to become super crucial. It's always been crucial, to be honest, but it's also been put on the back burner because, everybody's had aggressive hiring goals that they need to meet, etc. And it's not been just part of something that people need to be doing in day in, day out. And when I say day in, day out, you don't have to do it every day. You just have to keep it front of mind as, that sort of smooth candidate experience through and through. It shouldn't just be about a role. It should be about what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it. We've both kind of signed up for this sort of fractional working, and I think it's interesting. I get feedback in the market that people don't really either understand it or think it's a dumb title. It's just a faddy title. But
yeah,
you mentioned it a couple of times in relation to what you're doing. What's your view on fractional work? What's your sort of take?
Yeah. I have to give a couple of shout outs here, Matt, and you're one of them. And I kind of jumped on the fractional bandwagon when I saw Kat Kingshot, Natalie Stones, yourself, everybody sort of move into the fractional direction. I was like, this sounds cool and funky, but it also makes a lot more sense. And what fractional recruitment, fractional itself is where you hire someone who's part-time, a recruiter sourcer, but for long-term work. So it's, let's say if you get someone to improve your hiring processes or make a few important hires each year, but it's different from a one-time project, freelancing or full-time sort of recruitment outsourcing. It's useful for companies that need recruitment, but not full-time. So what you're getting is you're hiring someone at the fraction of a cost, you're hiring an SME, and you're also hiring someone who's going to be in your corner for that time duration. So as an example, the recruiter will work a few hours a week, and it just makes it a lot more easier to manage than multiple short-term jobs happening at the same time. I hope I explained that properly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess I echo that. I just see it as flexible expertise for your evolving business. We're both wanting to work with startups, scale ups, those kind of organizations who may not have the need, the finances to be able to afford someone at a senior leadership level, but need that expertise. So it actually makes perfect sense to bring somebody in on a 1 day a week basis, 2 days a week basis, and then they control the cost. I think it certainly seems to be the such a swell of interest. It's a growing sector. I think in the next couple of years there'll be more and more of this, whether it changes name or whether it's something else. But I think fractional makes perfect sense for businesses who are looking to grow, but as you say, maybe don't have a long-term need or they don't have rather they just need sort of short-term support, either 3 to 6 months just to oversee. So that's kind of, I'm in the same boat as you. That's really the aim for me is to work with those organizations, help them establish their systems, their processes, and hire the people that are going to run the business on an ongoing basis. But, be there as support and provide guidance as long as they need it.
And actually, Matt, I was going to ask you, so we've been longtime friends. We've kind of embarked on the solopreneur journey together. And, we call you Talent Daddy and AKA, Chief Scaler. I want to ask you this, and I would love you to tell us a little about Scalar's story. Like, what made you start your own business as well?
We were both made redundant from the same place, unfortunately, in March. And so it was a bit of a shock, and so I think it took us both a little bit of a while to sort of get our heads around it and then think about what's next. I think it was very clear for you that sourcing was the way forward, but I think I'd worked across internal recruitment, so I'd done sort of all aspects. So it took me a little while just to really sort of think where I could probably add the most value and what I was going to enjoy, what was going to make me want to get out of bed in the morning. I think where I landed was working with startups and scale ups, having done that for the last 10 years, the likes of Zero and Zendesk and Slalom to help businesses establish their systems, processes, and get that robustness right at the start of their journey. So they've got a really solid foundation in terms of knowing the right people to hire at that stage of the journey. I think 90% of startups fail. I think a big part of that is because they don't engage the right people from the start. Founder will have a great idea, and then they'll go, okay, well, who do I know? And then they tend to bring friends and former colleagues. And it tends, oftentimes, I'm not saying it all the way off, but oftentimes it tends to be people who are very, very similar to themselves. And I think from the off, you struggle to get that breadth of diversity and of diversity of thinking. So I think what I've seen firsthand on several occasions is the importance of getting the right foundations in place from the off. And that's the aim of Scalr, is to work with those kind of businesses to say, hey, let's create a strategy that we can all agree on, that will get senior leadership buy-in and will help to drive and grow the business in the right way. Let's identify the right people for this stage of the journey. I was the same at Slalom. We grew it from, I think, number 23 or something, all the way through to sort of 250, and that was the point where things started to change for me, and it became less of a startup and scale up, more of something a bit bigger, a bit more corporate, and that was my cue to get off and do something different. So it's making sure that you identify that within the people that you're hiring, that you're bringing people on at the right stages of the journey, so that they can grow with the business, rather than have somebody who's expecting all the systems, processes, frameworks in place from day one and then very, very quickly struggle. So yeah, it's finding the right people, getting the right conversations, getting the right methods and thinking right from an interviewing perspective, make sure hiring managers are fully trained and are aware of exactly their responsibilities and how to train and how to make sure they're removing things like implicit bias from their process as well. So all aspects within that sort of stage is what gets me most excited, gets me most passionate about the work I do.
I think, with scalr, and obviously I've been following your journey since day one, and I think there's something very interesting about scalr and what you'll have to offer and what you're doing for your customers. And you're building this massive talent ecosystem that I don't think exists right now. And you're also very well connected in the Melbourne network, as well as within Australia, and everybody knows who you are. So I can't wait to at some stage partner with you and see, where we can make any sort of difference. Matt, before we close off, now it's my turn to ask you 5 questions. Are you ready?
Sure, fire away.
All right. So this is my quick fire corner for Matt Woodard. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Well, the age I'm getting to, I think the ability to play football or do any kind of exercise without hurting for 3 days afterwards is probably quite up there for me. Yeah.
So are you saying you need like a younger body? Is that what you're
just the younger body? Yeah, that's probably going to do it for me. Yeah.
One book or podcast you're currently into and why?
Yeah, well, I'm actually reading. I've just started reading a really cool book called "The Hard Thing About Hard Things" by Ben Horowitz. It was recommended to me by a friend recently, and it's just talking about his journey from through startups to selling businesses for many billions of dollars, and just sort of talking about some of the challenges he has, even at this fledgling stage that we're at in our business. There's a lot of parallels and things that you could take from it. So just really insightful ways that he's sort of helped grow and scale businesses, and the mistakes he's made. And I think it's just it's really good to know that even people that successful, started somewhere and had very obvious fuck ups along the way.
Well, that's how it should always be, right? I think if our businesses were straightforward, we were obviously doing something wrong.
Yeah.
What's the most spontaneous thing you've ever done?
The most spontaneous thing I've ever done was probably, and this is probably the most life-changing thing I've ever done as well, actually, was when I was living in Glasgow, 2006, 2007, just deciding one day that I had enough of the British weather and just booked a one-way ticket to New Zealand. Having never been there before, didn't know anybody, didn't know anything about the place, just booking a one-way ticket to Wellington, selling all our stuff, selling our car, and just moving lock, stock, and barrel to start a new life in Wellington, New Zealand. And I've never looked back since. That was over 16 years ago now.
So you left the UK for the bad weather, and then you come to Melbourne.
Well, I left the UK and then went to Wellington, which is, the weather is very, very similar, if not the second windiest place in the world. And then moved to Melbourne for very British weather as well. So clearly, as much as I say I like the warm, maybe I don't.
Yeah, you're probably missing home too much.
Yeah, it just reminds me of home. Actually, the last few couple of weeks in Melbourne with the rain and the dark has really reminded me of a British Christmas. So it has made me feel a little bit like it did back in the day.
All right, favorite tool or app that you use every day, you can't do without, and don't say it's like what was that? You used to do this calorie counter thing. I remember you telling me about it. I hope it's not that. No,
it sounds a bit cliche, but honestly, the thing that I'm using every day at the moment is ChatGPT 4. It's unbelievable. It's just so good. It's I've got everything in my brain that I've been just trying to order, and it has just been a really, really great way of helping me order my thoughts and really sort of get some structure within the business. Because I think starting a business, you'll probably feel the same. There's been so many moments where imposter syndrome has kicked in, and just that sort of lack of confidence going, you don't know what you're doing. And I think that to me, that the tools like that have been really, really good to help sort of fill in some of the gaps along the way, and I think it's been really, really good tool. So yeah, as much as I know it's everyone's kind of using it at the moment, for me it's been a great tool these last couple of months.
I'll be a little cheeky and I'll ask you, so what's the weirdest prompt you've put in ChatGPT?
The weirdest prompt? It was probably trying to find a picture of a panda shark for you the other day when I was trying to pump you up a little bit after you were feeling a little bit down. So yeah, probably something to do with a panda shark or something panda related.
Well, on that note, I can definitely tell you need to be prompting a bit more, because it felt like it was a mix of a 5-year-old and a 13-year-old, like meshing something together. But it was pretty cute and I appreciate it.
Probably.
So thank you. Last question from me, and I'll hand it back over to you. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received or given anyone?
That's a really good question. I think it's probably, and again, this sounds kind of straightforward, but I think it probably is don't sweat the small stuff. Like really just only worry about the things that you can control. I think that's for someone who likes to sort of to sort of be in control and sort of positively influence things. I think that was a good lesson to say, okay, well sometimes there is just things out of your control that you can't. So I think that's the thing for me that and I think actually, funnily enough, having kids has been a really good lesson in that. Is that while obviously you want your kids to be brought up in a certain way and have manners and respect and do that sort of thing. Kids are notoriously difficult beasts, and I think it's just picking your battles and not sweating the small stuff. That's probably been the thing for me. And
especially with this year, right? Us going into unknown territories, starting up our own business, not knowing what the hell we are doing. But you know what? I also have to call out people that we've been supported by. Like, there's been Laura Johnson, Nathan Reese. There's so many other people who obviously will take ages to name, but we've had some really phenomenal people in our corner, sort of advising, supporting, and guiding us, while we sort of navigate through these muddy waters.
Do for me, that's been the most humbling part of this process, is that, when you get in the situation, you really sort of find out who your true friends are. And I think it's been really humbling for both of us. We're both pretty well known and hopefully well regarded in the industry here. But actually to have the support and the amount of people that would sort of call and check in and say, just making sure you're going okay at the beginning was just really humbling to have that. And then, we've got our little community of solopreneurs that we're growing. So LJ and Megan Luttrell and Bruce Chan and that sort of thing. So we've got there is a really sort of nice growing community of people that are here to support us and see us be successful. And there's so many people who have reached out and are more confident than I am sometimes that the scalr will be successful. And I'm sure you've had the same thing. So no, absolutely, it's been a really humbling experience. And I think it's great, and I'm excited about the future.
And I think we're both big believers in the fact that there's room for everyone. There's no competition. There's room for everyone to come in and excel in some shape or form. And, if Matt and I can help anyone, absolutely reach out to us. We're super approachable people, and we're always happy to share, some of our journey, our learnings into starting up our own business and doing things and learning. We fucked up. Yeah, we have sort of, screwed up in between, but that's okay. We're people. So this is how we're going to learn, and we're going to grow from it. And who we were a year ago, we're absolutely not the same people.
Yeah, 100%. You're 100. You nailed it. 100% right. So, look, that is it. I mean, we could, the listeners can probably tell, we could probably rattle on for another hour or so, just talking about all things TA and sourcing. But look, I have always really enjoyed chatting with you, Denise. You know that. I've been really grateful for your support, particularly over the last sort of 6 to 9 months. We're obviously following slightly different paths, but it's been amazing to see your journey and excited to see what comes next for you. But thank you very much for having me on today. Great to kick off the year with such positive conversation. Wish everybody who's listening a really, really happy 2024, and thanks again for letting me take over.
Awesome. And wishing you all the success in 2024 and beyond, my friends. So, thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. And we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. If you found this valuable, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, happy sourcing and stay crafty. Until next time.